Have everyone join us for this discussion from our Black Authors series. And good to have former colleague Bruce Jackson, who was a year ahead of Jackie and I at Georgetown Law School. Let's look to the Lord. Oh, gracious and eternal God, we give you thanks, Lord, for this day, which you have made. We thank you, Father God, for the journey of the African American struggle that continues. But Lord, we know we've made great progress because you have been with us through the years. And I think Bruce's story is an amazing story of through ups and downs. Lord, you brought him to just this pinnacle in the corporate world, not without its challenges, but he was able to overcome them all by your grace and your mercy. We pray that you would be with us as we discuss his life and his work, and just pray that it will be fruitful for all who are involved. Continue to be with him and his family. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, Jackie, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Pastor, for that opening and for the prayer. Thank you for all that have joined, and I'm sure that there are more that are going to join us this afternoon. But a special thanks to Bruce Jackson, who's with us. He is in the lovely shade of yellow mustard, coming to us from his home in Charlotte, I believe. Are you in Charlotte
I
right
am.
now?
Yep.
So we really appreciate him joining us from a distance, and this is the blessing of technology that we can still move forward, gather together, learn, and share, particularly during this Black History Month, although Black History is every day, particularly for those of us who are of color. Today's discussion is being recorded, as well as microphones being muted for participants, those who are joining. Bruce and I will remain unmuted, and the chat will be open or is open. So for those who have read the book or during the course of the discussion, if you have questions or commentary that you would like to be shared, please drop that in the chat, and I will do my best to ensure that it's incorporated in the discussion. And I will be saving some time at the end for a few more questions with Bruce, but we will try to be diligent with the hour that's dedicated to this. We're starting a few minutes behind, but I still will be endeavoring for us to be finished by 4:05, 4:10. So with that, let me read a brief bio that Bruce has shared with us. For those of you who have the book, you may have seen this as well, but I'm just going to read it verbatim and not trust my memory. So after 24 years, Bruce Jackson retired as Associate General Counsel and Managing Director for Strategic Partnerships out of the Office of the President at Microsoft. Bruce was involved in the corporation's government affairs and corporate citizenship initiatives. He also provided legal support to a $20 billion sales operation in a previous role. Prior to joining Microsoft in 2000, as corporate counsel for the digital media division, Bruce founded the entertainment law firm of Jackson, Brown, Powell, and St. George, representing the likes of Heavy D, Pete Rock, and CL Smooth, LL Cool J, and Busta Rhymes. He has received Microsoft's Diversity Award and participated in Microsoft's law and corporate affairs diversity efforts. He helped to launch Microsoft's Elevate American Veterans Initiative, and he also worked to develop its diverse recruitment pipeline. Bruce is a current board member of the National Association of Women and Minority-Owned Law Firms and the Hip Hop Museum. Throughout his career, his passion has lied in driving diversity and inclusion in the legal profession and the tech industry. He has a bachelor's degree in accounting from Hofstra University and a JD and an LLM in tax from Georgetown University Law Center. That's where we met, and as Pastor said at the outset, he was a colleague of ours just 1 year ahead. Never Far From Home, today's book that we are going to be discussing, is his first book, and we are so happy and delighted to have him with us this afternoon. So thank you, Bruce. We're going to jump right in. So
Sure,
the
let's do it.
title of the book, Never Far From Home, My Journey from Brooklyn to Hip Hop, Microsoft, and the Law. So many of those who are on the call, and maybe some who haven't finished the book, will see that the title of the book, Never Far From Home, is something that I ask most authors. How did you arrive at that title? I imagine that you may have considered others, but why that title? And how many other titles did you consider before landing on that one?
I mean, we kind of was coming up with titles as we're writing the book, but at the end, that's when you really see the book together. And then the theme was always going back home, and
Hmm.
that's just the reality. And what I mean by going back home, I still have friends and family that lives in the projects, and people are surprised. At times, I'll go to the projects, and if it's too late, I'll stay with a family or friend. Right? I'm not.
Yeah, yeah,
I just go back as Bruce. I don't go back as a Microsoft attorney, although I try to get them interested in moving forward, and certainly their kids, the next generation, but they know me as Bruce. I
sure.
think I'm the same person. They say, Bruce, you're not quite the same, but you're cool enough to fit in here.
It's good that you still feel that way, even with the decades behind you and the decades ahead, for you to have that sense of familiarity and what home is. So that's great to hear. And I do think for a lot of African Americans, particularly those who are pursuing professions and credentials and other degrees, we sort of strive for those so that we can go somewhere far from home,
Oh,
right?
that's the reality. Yep.
That's the reality. But throughout your book, it's really evident that you have never strayed far from home, and that is what grounds you. Maybe it's like home base. You go
Yep.
back, you get perspective, and you get rejuvenated and get further perspective about where you are in this stage of life. How long did the writing process take? Can you talk a little bit about sort of what got you started? What was the process for you? And how did you decide what to include and what not to include in the
Okay.
text?
How do I get started? I was asked several times by clients of mine, entertainment clients, that Bruce, you should write a book and give a different perspective for the people in our neighborhood. They're looking at us as entertainers, whether it's basketball or music, but there's more things. You came out with us and you pursued a different career. So I said no a few times. But the last time they had me on the phone with an agent, and an agent's the person who gets your proposal and shop it to major publishers. And so the agent said, I think you had a good story. I said, well, let's go for it. So the process is you have to write a proposal. If it's music, it's like a demo, and then you shop it around to different music companies or publishing companies. So the proposal took about 6 months to write. And a proposal can be chapters, small chapters in a book, or just a summary. And then at that point, the agent shops it to all the major publishers. And so we decided to go with Simon and Schuster because there was a connection with the publisher and myself. So that's kind of the process. And you asked, what was the third question you asked?
How did you decide in that process,
What to put in the book?
what to
What I
include and what not to include?
what I did, I just try to go back as far as I can remember and things I can remember, and I just included everything. I didn't exclude anything. And interesting you asked that because at the end of the book, Simon and Schuster said, "You sure you want to write some of these things in a book? Executives at companies don't put all of this stuff in a book." And you're trying to get the vice chairman of Microsoft to write a forward. So I said, listen, the book is not for Microsoft. It's not to
Mm,
inspire Microsoft. It's to meet people where need to meet them. And that's where they are. They have to see me as
right,
themselves. They can't see
right,
me as an executive that's far from them. But if they see
right.
that I live the life that they lived, it gives them inspiration and hope to do the same thing.
Absolutely.
I didn't exclude anything, ironically, not at all.
Wow. So the editing, there wasn't a lot left on the editing
Oh,
board or the
no.
editing floor. So
Indeed.
there was nothing in the book that your editor said or suggested that you come at it from a different angle.
Well, they
Like
said,
you,
"Are you sure you want to put you stole things? You
okay.
sure you want
Wow.
to put that you did things like some illegal things?"
Right.
And I said, "Well, statute of limitations over with." I said, and that's just the reality when you live in the inner city. You do some of the things
Right.
that I did. And I said,
Right.
it's important to me to really, really connect with the people who need to be connected with. And I'm at the end of my
Absolutely.
career anyway. So if Microsoft want to get rid of me after this, I'll get a big paycheck.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mention Microsoft in particular because you are now at the end of your storied career as a Microsoft executive. You were obviously very successful, very highly regarded. Brad Smith, is he the CEO? CEO
He's a
of
vice
Microsoft,
chairman.
vice chair, did write a foreword for the book, so it is, it's in perpetuity. But your story is so much bigger. I think some folks will think about the fact that you were an executive. That's the big story, but your story is so much bigger. And it does start in your childhood. So why don't we start at the beginning and take us back a little bit, because there's plenty in the text. And I have to say the authenticity and the transparency, the plain speak of your memoir is notable, because you could have fluffed it up. And as you said, you stayed true not only to yourself, your community, and those around you, but you endeavored to connect. And I know for me, there are many portions of the text in your story that I was able to connect with. Can you tell us a little bit more about, paint a picture of what childhood was like for you
Uh,
in the city,
I
in
grew up.
Brooklyn in particular, in
I grew up
Brooklyn,
in
right?
Brooklyn. I grew up in a
Right.
tenement building in Brooklyn. It's Crown Heights. At that point, pre-gentrified Crown Heights. Crown Heights is now gentrified, but it was a predominantly African American poor community. We were on public assistance, right? We certainly received the cheese and everything else I could remember for free, and shoes. A lot of people don't recall shoes, but I remember going to the store, Buster Brown, and we had a certificate to
Right.
get free shoes. So that's how it was, right? I mean, it was a struggle, right? And my
Yeah.
father was really in and out of my life, not a consistent figure in my life. So he wasn't around for a lot of the hard times that we had to go through. And so that's it. And you do everything someone would do in the inner city in Brooklyn like that. And at about the age of 10, we moved to the projects, public housing in Manhattan. And at that point, I got to see how rich people live, because we moved to right across from Lincoln Center, the projects. So everything is 4 square block projects. Everything else I would say is upper middle class. So we got to see how other people live, but nonetheless, we lived in the 4 square blocks,
Right. Right.
right? And you do everything that someone would do, right? To try to help their parents survive, right? So you do
Yeah.
steal things, right? But the purpose is to help out in the house, to help get your school clothes and things of that nature. So you're
Yeah.
kind of in a situation where you're just trying to help your parents. So I did what most kids in the inner city would do.
Yeah. And I would say inner city children are still doing, even though we always
Right.
talk about generationally things change and when I was a kid and all that. But I do think for the Black community and the Black community in the inner city, some of the things that you experienced and some of the emotions that you may have had are the same. And one of the things that happened to you early, you mentioned the move at the age of 10. You also had another sort of life-altering situation, circumstances that you were faced with. Can you share a little bit more? It's in the book, it's in the text, but
Right.
I'd like you to share a little bit more about it, and particularly the feelings, because I think there are a lot of us here that are very concerned about our communities and what's happening to the youth in our communities and children. Can you talk a little bit about and share more about that
Right, right.
circumstance?
And I always like to tell this story to when I speak to a panel of Caucasian judges, because people have perceptions about Black people. And I try to help them reset and rethink it. And
Right,
coming from me, when I tell the story as a Microsoft executive, they kind of look at it as more credible, right? And how can that happen? So
right.
no, my mother taught us immediately once we moved to Manhattan from Brooklyn how to take the train back to
New
Brooklyn.
York.
And she showed us how to take the train back to Brooklyn. And one day after school, I took the train to Brooklyn. And I got off one train, was about to get on another train. And at that point, there was a Caucasian man and a Caucasian cop. They said, "That's him." And the Caucasian man said, "Go get him." So the cop started walking in my direction. And then I said, "What do you do in that situation?" What anyone would do, because my experience with police was not a good one, right, in my community. So I ran,
Right,
and there was nowhere to run but to the front of the train and in the tracks. So one train was stationary. I jumped on the track, stepped over the third rail, got on the edge, and went from one station to the other. And by the time I got to the other station, the cops were there, and they arrested me, took me to the precinct, 72nd precinct in Brooklyn, handcuffed me to one of those old wooden chairs because this was some time ago. And they
Hmm.
said, we know you committed to crime. I said, what crime? They said, you stole some. I said, I didn't steal anyone. And I'm crying throughout the process, of course. And they said, you did. We have evidence. Just say you did it. And I said, I didn't do it. And then they tried a different tactic. If you say you did it, you get to go home. And as simple as that is, as 10 years old kid saying you get away from these strangers and you tell me all I have
Right,
to say is I did it and I get to go see
right,
my mother again and my grandmother, I
right.
came really close to saying I did it. But for some reason, I don't know why. If I did, I probably wouldn't be here today because I would be on a different track.
Sure.
I could maintain my innocence. And ultimately, my mother and my uncle came to pick me up. And it was 2 weeks went by. My mother called and they finally said, oh, we found the person who did it. So there was no apology. And so I
Right.
tell that story to people because, particularly Caucasian folks, right? Because when they see an African American run, they always think he's guilty. And so my message is let's not be quick to judgment. They could be afraid just like me.
Right.
And I said,
Right.
sometimes people may say they're innocent. They're not always, if they say they're guilty, they're not always guilty. Sometimes
Right.
they may just want to go home and they don't have the strength to say no. Because I
Right.
came pretty close to it. So just think whenever you make judgments, when I talk to Caucasian judges, don't look at someone running as a sign of guilt. Don't look at someone saying they're guilty as them really being guilty. Perhaps they were 10, 12, 14, 15 years old, and they just wanted to go home. They could be an adult and still want to go home.
Exactly.
So that's an important story that I make sure I get out to the opposite race.
Yeah. I think I'm going to push it to say, I think everyone, because I do think absolutely those, you know, Caucasians who haven't interacted with people of color. But I think even in our own community, sometimes we just react, we're reactionary.
We
And
are.
so on the cover of the book, you have a photo, there's a photo of you, your mom, and I'm presuming your sister. How old are you in that photo
I was about 10 years old.
around this time? Because
Yeah.
I was looking at that, noticing your key. Is
Yeah.
that your,
My old dirty
latchkey?
key.
Your
Yeah.
old dirty key on a
Keychain
string or a rope
on
that
the
you were
string.
just
Yeah.
because you did have certain freedoms. You know, your mother was giving you instruction. You know, you were getting on the subway, getting off the subway, moving about a little bit, but then the circumstance happens. And just when I read it, and I reread that passage last night again, and it was a little cinematic in my mind, and my heart was racing
Mhm.
because the moment that you jump down into the tracks, like so many things could have happened. And then, you know, you're running through the tunnels, it's dark. And then when you emerge on the other end, the three officers. So I just thought of the sheer force. You know, you have one officer pursuing you initially, and you come out, and then you're, you know, surrounded by three, four, five other officers for just
Right.
a 10, you know, you're just a kid.
Yep.
And you were in that precinct for more than just 10 minutes. It wasn't a matter of them calling your mom immediately. They
Right.
literally put you in handcuffs. So just for everyone to get that visual of the kid on the cover of the book, 10 years old, in handcuffs, not for a violent crime. They said it was theft, but it probably again would have been petty theft. You know, that's a big deal. And the fact that you had the wherewithal to stick to the truth and not succumb to that, because there was a moment where I was like, I can imagine you just said, you know, you could have said so many other things,
All right.
as you said. Um, you're our third author in this Black Authors series. We had Walter Pryor the first week talking about letters from his ancestors, from his grandmother. And then last week we had Professor Clyla Brown Dean talking about identity politics and how much identity politics shape our communities, our own identity, and our level of engagement in our homes and in our communities, and how we can continue to maintain a level of engagement. Here we are in 2026 with the world around us. I would love for you to, it's clearly that there is detail in your memoir about your family and particularly the women in your life. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to give voice to your ancestors, those that have passed on, maybe some of your living family members that have supported you in the journey. Can you offer some of those reflections about how they deposited in you, what words were going through your head when you were sitting in that precinct at the age of 10 that somehow grounded you to know not to succumb to the pressure. And sort of as you wrote this memoir, what those ancestors deposited in you that came to light even further as you sort of recalled some memories of your childhood and growing up.
Yeah, I have to say there were three, you're right. The three important women in my life was my grandmother, my aunt, and my mother, right? My mother and my grandmother wouldn't really talk much about what happened in the South Carolina in the 40s and the 30s, but my aunt would regularly express the discrimination and equities and just the gruesome things that Caucasians would do to African Americans there, including the KKK. So I got my mother's growing up experience from my aunt, who passed away, unfortunately, probably 2 months ago now.
Oh,
She was
okay.
really a mother. She was a mother to me in many respects.
That's your Aunt Viola,
On
correct?
Viola,
So we,
absolutely.
we, we name our ancestors, so we're
Yep.
going to give her
So
credit. That's
she,
awesome.
when I was in college, I was a summer program. It was challenging, and I talk about that in the book. It was challenging, and I had to complete it to get into Hofstra because I got into Hofstra through a special program. And I was going to quit. And I called my mother. My mother said, okay, you can come home. Because she was just being a mother.
Yeah.
You're hurting, you can come home. My aunt said, you cannot come home, Bruce. She
Mm,
said, because your mother, she started by just saying, your mother, myself, and your grandmother picked cotton in the South. And no one in the Jackson family ever graduated from college. At that point, she hung up, and I said, "Phew." I thought it was my journey. And at that point, I
yeah.
started reflecting on all her stories about how they was being mistreated. And I said, this is not about me.
Mm,
Because if it was about me, I would have gave up long. I wouldn't be here. She gave me purpose, right? And it was almost like, okay, I got to pay these folks back for what they did to my mother, my grandmother, and my aunt. And that was the strength. She was pretty much the connector in the family. She knew the history of all the ancestors and what happened, what transpired, and no one graduated. But she also started seeing the future when no one was graduating.
right.
Right. And my generation, no one in my generation even graduated.
Yeah.
Right. So she saw that. And so she was not going to let me fall victim to the same thing everyone else fell victim to in the Jackson family. She wanted me to really start a trend.
Mm,
And so that's what it was. She was the connector. She was a cheerleader, a connector, a supporter. And although she was on public assistance, she would send food stamps to Hofstra to help me survive and was a
right.
cheerleader from that point to the very till she died 2 months ago. Right. And
Yeah.
try to point to me, to other members of the family as a way to get out.
Or
So
is your mom still living?
my mother's still living. My mother's 90, still living, totally
God
independent.
bless.
And my
God
father's
bless.
still living too. He's 97,
That's a
independent.
blessing. And so your Aunt Viola, how old was she? And was she older or younger than your mom?
Mother, younger. She's 83. She was
She
83.
was younger. It's interesting the dynamic of the sisters, right? Of the
Yep.
two of them and the stories that they carried and how they carried into Brooklyn from the South, and then
Yep.
how they navigated for sure. And I do think from the book, it's very clear that your Aunt Viola was I don't want to say a disciplinarian, but she would push.
She
Sounds
was
like
a
she was
disciplinarian, absolutely.
okay, she was a disciplinarian.
She was.
She had the switches.
She had
She
all
had
of
the
that. Absolutely. The black
okay.
switch.
Okay. How about the men in your life and the men beyond your biological dad, just men in general, as a young African American boy growing up in Brooklyn in I'd say in the 70s, like 60s,
Right.
70s, that was your youth,
At that
early
point, there
80s.
weren't there weren't any, to be quite honest with you. There
Right.
weren't no men role model, right? My mom
Mm,
wasn't really a model. My father wasn't there. If I would say there was someone who was somewhat of a model, a role model, who attended all my graduations was supportive, I would have to say it was my mother's boyfriend
mhm.
who was there in place of my father, who filled that gap.
Right.
The one that I looked
Right.
up to, who was supportive, like I said, and attend all my graduation ceremonies.
Wow. Bruce, so although I asked about specific ancestors, in the text, you clearly describe the Brooklyn community in Crown Heights. You also
Hmm.
describe what was happening in Manhattan and the projects when you were there. But you were very clear in talking about the various, and I say characters in air quotes, because there was a diversity of the kinds of people
Hmm.
that you were seeing. Some of them just, walking the streets, some Caucasian. So you were seeing all of diversity of New York. You are a true New Yorker.
Right, right,
So I
absolutely.
know there are a lot, I know there are some New Yorkers on this call and folks who still, but New York is a very unique city in that you do see all the stratifications of poverty, of ethnicity,
You do.
and of wealth.
Yep.
And somehow you were able to navigate that, and you navigated that with some of your friends, your childhood friends that took other paths than you did. And I don't know that I'm curious if you would say in retrospect, and as you were writing your memoir, if you have further commentary about why your choices were yours versus some of the others that you sort of walked alongside and made another choice. Do you have any sort of
You know
thoughts
what?
on
I
that?
reflect on that all the time. And
Yeah.
I would have to say, and I just having a conversation with someone yesterday in
Mhm.
terms of where I am and how I got here. I said, I shouldn't be here. I said, but
Mhm.
God put me here for a reason, right? And I think it's to inspire people because I did stuff. But I had people after I had one foot in the negative territory before I put the other in, they'll say, Bruce, stop. You need to
Mhm.
go outside. And sometimes it was what people who you would deem as bad people, drug dealers.
Yeah.
Say, nah, you cannot do that, Bruce. Just continue the track that you're on. So I
Yeah.
did have people in the community who were supportive from that perspective, right? And who were a
Right.
cheerleader and continue to be cheerleaders, although they were doing negative things.
Right.
But I'd say that when I think about the stuff that I went through, I shouldn't be here at all. Certainly,
Mm.
I've been in rooms that I shouldn't have been in with Microsoft, some of the presidents of companies listening to and having discussions, traveling all over the world. I shouldn't have been there. So I
Right.
told someone said today, I said, listen, my goal now is to make sure my kids are set up for generational wealth. I've
Mhm.
seen things that people haven't seen, been places, have assets that people don't have. So I said, I'm done. I really said to someone, I said, if it was over today, I would say, I was able to live a life that people don't ordinarily live, certainly not
Yeah.
coming from my background. So I think
Right.
I think clearly I was blessed, right? I tell people all the time.
Right.
And with that blessing, I think is a obligation and a commitment to help other people, right? Part of the book is to inspire people like myself to push themselves further because I think the reality is the system's not designed for that to happen. And we can't
Right.
wait for the system to change. So that's why I think it's Bruce. I talk to people all the time, and I think writing a book was a way in which I can just get critical mass, right?
Sure.
Reach more
Sure.
people with the story. So I
Right.
think that's the purpose. And my daughter said, Dad, okay, that's great. You're doing that. But what you need to do now is write a book or talk about how people can truly retire. Because a lot of our people just do not know how to do that. So she's pushing
Right.
me to have a retirement dialogue and discussion of how people can truly not work ever again and
Right.
pass on wealth to their kids.
I think she's a smart young lady because that is something our community does not talk about. We still are talking about just wanting to get to a point of retirement, but we also don't talk about how we live through retirement.
Right.
And our communities are still, again, it is the generational piece, but I don't know that we have amassed the kind of generational wealth, certainly of white America.
Right.
But even within our community, people are doing well, but don't know how to teach. And so I think is that something you are thinking about in your retirement, or you
She's the one
just
that
pushing it?
she's pushing it, and she and I have a great relationship.
That's great. That's awesome. Um, so I think folks can go into the book and read about sort of the innovation that you displayed pretty early, how your mind was working in ways that really weren't necessarily taught about. This is how you turn a dollar. This is
Yeah.
how you um, I'm going to use the term exploit because I can't come up with a better one, but in a positive way, exploit an opportunity
Mhm.
to create money for yourself, because this is an age where young people are trying to find the fast dollar.
Yep.
And I think you use the term clearly, easy money. So
Yep.
you saw easy money left and right. And you took some opportunities for some easy money, but then you also, again, that inner voice, the ancestors, what was poured into you, what I guess, however, God has blessed and purposed your life. You didn't go the route of easy money that was detrimental, but you
Right.
did have a little easy money. Can you talk a little bit about your newspapers? Because I
Right.
thought that was genius, and
No,
I was
I think the reality is growing
I
up
was
when I grew
disappointed
up,
it
I
stopped.
certainly had the opportunity, as you said, to sell
Yeah,
drugs, to
yeah,
rob people. I mean, you can do those things. That's
yeah,
simple.
yeah.
But I knew the consequences. I know a lot of my friends were going away. And so
Right.
I said, I'm not going to do that. So what I did, my friend and I was walking around a newsstand and we saw newspapers there. And we said, why don't we just sell newspapers? And why don't we just get up early in the morning when the New York Times, the Daily News drop it off? So we would get up at 5 o'clock, get there by 6, and as soon as the papers dropped off, we would take them and then we would go back to the projects or on the street and start selling them. And we saw that was making a lot of money. And at that point, I was able to get myself a Panasonic 13-inch color television. And people didn't
Yeah,
have color TVs back then. I
that's
was
right.
based out in my family, not just my house. Bruce has a color television. And my other friends bought like what was known as the boom box, the big cassette music players. And
Right.
so we said, let's start recruiting other people. So I recruited some of my cousins from Brooklyn. And on Sunday, because that's when the papers are more expensive, we just dropped, we went to all the stores that they dropped in the city and we picked them up and we just started selling them. And the thing is, my father, I said, popped in and out of my life. So my mother didn't really say anything or question me too much. But my father happened to come and he said, I know what you're doing. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, I know you're stealing papers. So if you're stealing those papers, I'm going to call the police. I said, what are you talking about? And he said, I'm going to call the police. But what he didn't realize that he wasn't just punishing me and other people who were affected by it, my friends, right? Because it was
Mm,
good money. And they said, because they know he wasn't around. I don't know why they said it, but they said, let's take him out. I said, that's my dad. We're not doing that.
and they were serious.
We're not doing that. I said, and nothing, they didn't do anything. But I mean, I'm sure they would have been willing to at least hurt him at that point to stop me
Yeah,
calling the cops had I not said anything. But I'm glad he did that, and I thank him constantly for it. I say, you remember that time? I'm glad you did that because we were
yeah.
going to the same spot week after week. Eventually, they would have
It was
set
a
us
matter
up
of time.
and we would
Right.
have got arrested. So I said, and again, I wouldn't be here today. I would start on a different track.
Yeah, yeah.
So those are the type of things you do. You look for ways to make money, and that's illegal, but it's not as bad. It wasn't as bad in my mind as selling dope.
Sure. Yeah, of course not. Of course not. I'm just curious how many of your friends were involved in this enterprise by the time you started with two or three of you?
Probably
Was
about
it
four
like,
from Brooklyn would come up on Sundays, family and
yeah,
friends, and probably about a good 8, 9 of us total.
yeah. That's a little enterprise. That was a little enterprise across boroughs. So yeah, and I agree with you, and certainly the thanks to your dad in that regard. Let's make a shift now a little bit to adulthood. I'm going to pass over Hofstra. That was obviously a very pivotal time,
Right.
because I think that's when you kicked in academically. Maybe I won't. I won't over. Let's take one moment just to comment about the Hofstra experience and transition, because that was clearly a pivotal point in you recognizing
Right.
the potential of your future. So can you talk a little bit about that transition to Hofstra?
Yeah, I think from high school to Hofstra, I entered Hofstra through a program called High Education Opportunities for people who are academically and financially disadvantaged. So I wasn't ready. I thought I was
Mm,
ready, but I wasn't. And in the summer program, as I told you, it was just too difficult. I was ready to quit. But we did have a dean who kind of set the right example for all of us and said, you can do it. I mean, look at the accomplishment of other African American leaders. So that's what he would constantly drill in us and give us the tools that we need to be successful. So that's what I learned. Like, okay, Bruce, you got to catch up to these people. They're not smarter, but you have to catch up. And catching up means if they're going to spend 2 hours and then go party, I would take 6, 7 hours at my desk. And so I said, working harder is going to be my way of catching up. And so
Yeah,
that's when I learned that because I started from a disadvantaged background, I have to just work hard. I have to outwork people. And that's when I just pursue that whole attitude, even Georgetown,
right,
Microsoft, et cetera.
right. It was the work ethic,
Yep.
and putting in the work, and you put in the work even in an uncomfortable space,
Hmm.
because I think that that's something, I think generationally, I talk to young people, hear from young people where they're just ready to, I guess, make that call like you did to your Aunt Viola or to someone, or they don't make the call, they just sort of check out
Right.
and not push through all of those emotions and feelings. And I thought it was interesting when you describe how the living environment in Hofstra was not, um, was an improvement. I guess let's say it was an improvement from the projects in terms of the,
Oh,
the walls, the dining, cafeteria
dining
food, all that
hall,
other stuff.
nice room, bed, meal plan. It was great.
Right, right. It was great, but it really wasn't that you were a part of it.
No,
So
I wasn't.
like you were still in that other, and again, you were still never far from home, but there you were able to withstand that. So I don't know if you have reflections about the thoughts in your head, what you were feeling, maybe the support from your other, is it Nova, that the program
No,
that you
no
were in,
program.
Nova, your other Nova classmates, first generation, that pulled you through.
Oh, no,
Can you comment
absolutely.
about that a little
No,
bit?
absolutely. I think that the director of the program and the students at the upper class is what push you through. Think about it. I'm coming from the inner city. I'm going to a predominantly white institution. I have two Caucasian roommates that went to school in the West Coast, and they were better prepared than I was, right?
Hmm.
And they would, like I said, they would study for an hour or two and leave, and they'll come back at 2 in the morning and laugh that I was still at my desk. So yeah, it was uncomfortable, but we had a small community of African Americans part of the NOAA program that we kind of drew support from and strength from, particularly those who were upperclassmen, because that gave the
Mhm.
impression that you came from that environment and you're a senior, you're about to graduate. So definitely, without that support, had I not gone to Hofstra, I don't know what would have happened. Had I not gone through the NOAA program, I'm not sure what would have happened. Had why would have said, "Hey, come home." I think someone asked me what would I've done. I think I probably would have said, "Let me get a full-time job and try to go to a community college at night." So who knows what would have happened. Um,
Yeah,
so no, I think that the support, her basically challenging me, telling me that she needed me to do it. And the support at Hofstra was the foundation for me being who I am today. So you're right, Hofstra was the foundation.
yeah, definitely a major pivot
And I
for
won't
you.
interrupt again, Jackie,
Go
but
ahead.
what is Nova, Bruce?
New opportunity at Hofstra is an acronym, new opportunity at Hofstra. The NOAA program.
Okay,
Right.
thank
So that program, since you did mention it, I'll just, I want to say a plug. I think it's everybody on this call already knows this, but it's one of those programs that changes the trajectory of opportunity and potential for students that have the potential but just haven't seen it before, don't have anyone to push
Right.
them, to angle them along. So it's in the vein of, I think, a lot of programs around the country that have now been stripped away, that
Yep.
are no longer funded because of the current administration. Now understanding that, we all, as Bruce said, we always start football fields decades behind our
Yep.
counterparts in school. So, I know I'm a first generation, so I've always known we got to work 2, 3 times harder
Yep.
to get to where we are. So we can always outwork typically our white counterparts, because we are doing it with less
And you
support
still
and
do
opportunity.
today. At Microsoft, you still, as an African American, has to work twice as hard just to get the respect. You have to. That hasn't gone. That's happening today.
Yeah. Well, since you said it, Bruce, I wasn't going to go here, but I'm going to make a slight pivot. to Microsoft, because when you say you have to still do it today, and you're saying that to us as a seasoned, established executive, you've seen it all. When you got to Microsoft, there weren't many of other attorneys of color. Maybe you were less than a handful, I'm sure.
No, there was just two, me and my African Nigerian sister. It was just two of us.
Crazy. Okay, that's like, I don't know, 30 years ago. And now where you are today, where Microsoft is today, you're still saying to us, those Black professionals that are there still have to do the work differently, show up
People
differently
would
to,
say no, but I think it's just a reality. Any corporation,
yeah,
Microsoft, Meta,
right.
you have to show up differently. And
Yeah.
not only that, it's about everyone like to say it's merit, everything is merit, but I think it's some if people are familiar with you, right? And we just don't have critical mass at the top of these organizations. I think
Yeah.
if you look at it, I tell people all the time, and when I talk to companies and they say they're committed when I'm speaking about the book, I say, well, I'm going to do my investigation and look at your organizational structure. That'll tell me how
Hmm.
much you're committed, right? How many people reporting to the CEO is of color?
Hmm.
That's an example of what the rest of the organization is going to look like. And
Right.
oftentimes when you do it, you don't see many of us. And
That's right.
sometimes when you do see us, I challenge that too, because some of us are afraid to hire us, but certainly too many of us. And I'm like, had it not been for someone, you wouldn't be here. And so those
Right.
people are like that, I ignore. And I have to be quite honest, I would never support because we
Hmm.
don't need people like that. It's people who are willing to hire people. And for example, the team that, not to really talk about just about me, but the team that I hired when I supported a $20 billion business, we had 15 women, seven were African Americans, three African American males, two Latino males, and two Asian males, and two Caucasian males. And so people looked and said, Bruce, you're not going to do it again. They're looking at you. I said, well, they've been looking at me since I first started. And, and,
Yeah.
and I, they're looking at me, I can look at them because my philosophy has always been, what can you really take from me?
Mm.
And I wasn't afraid, right? And I had the relationship with the vice chairperson, and he would say, I'm hiring the best candidate that's available. I'm creating a broader net, so I'm giving an opportunity for women and minorities to interview. And all I told my teams were, listen, just make sure everyone on the loop has a fair opportunity to get the job. And that's it. That's all we need is a fair opportunity to get the job. But I still think, yeah, I think you got to show up, you got to work harder. Come on, people may not say that publicly. Certainly, no
Right.
corporations would say that. They'll say
Right.
everything's merit-based. And you get very few African Americans who would say that comfortably. Like
Right.
we have to work hard here and show that we're better to get the opportunity. But I'm saying the proof is in the numbers.
Right.
Folks are
That's
no
true.
smarter than when you get into these rooms about with these people who are high executives, you realize they're just human beings and they're not as smart as you think they are.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
so, and that's the
Yeah.
beauty of me being in the room. I look and be like, oh God, you went to all those schools, you're no smarter than me.
Right.
You just
Right.
had somebody, and when I speak to people who are general counsel, I said, you got your job when I go around and I'll have it privately because somebody looked out for you. And
Right.
they'll say, you're right.
Hmm.
That's how I got my job. You have
Exactly.
to be good, but then you also have to have relationships.
Relationships.
And people
Right.
have to like you and want to help you. Being
Right.
good's the baseline, but beyond that's not enough.
Okay. Well, this is the reality. I'm not gonna sort of, that exhale on my part was more, um, I don't know how to put it. Sometimes it is frustrating, disappointing to hear that it's still all the same, but I do think what you are accomplishing in your book, through your book, is pulling back covers and inspiring and encouraging. I know that probably was one of your goals. I know it does that.
Absolutely.
But I think for those who are on this call and who are listening in, it's just a reminder that sometimes we think the other is really different, and they really aren't. At the end of the day, you know, you just got to, show up, do the work in excellence, and then create and form the relationships. So one of the early career experiences you had where your otherness was very obviously challenged was when you were with the accounting firm. And the gentleman who, I'm trying to remember if I have my notes here. The
Silverstein.
gentleman, yes, Attorney Silverstein, quite interesting guy. Can you offer some further color commentary about what happened at that juncture? So clearly we kind of went on a tangent to where you are now and your retirement and all that, the wisdom that you have at the end of your career, but this was earlier in your career.
Right.
Um, and for those who haven't read the book, it's around page 138, 139. I'll let Bruce give the color commentary of what happened at lunch one day.
Right. You all may know Professor White is the professor at Georgetown, the tax professor. She recommended me
Yeah,
for the job.
yeah, Pat White.
So it was a summer job, right? Second year in law school, summer associate. So he took all the summer associates out. There was only about four of us. And we went to the Georgetown Country Club. And he was talking to one of the summer associates, Silverstein. It's Silverstein and Mullins, the firm. He was Leonard Silverstein.
Mhm.
And so he was talking to us, one of the associates, and I don't know how they got on the topic. And he said, "Well, Bruce, you know something about the ghetto." And I looked at him, and mind you, it was myself. I was the only black person the firm has ever any hired, period, in the history. And there were everyone was white at the table, other partners of the firm. And so when he said that to me, I paused because I have a tendency of pausing before I answer questions.
That's a good
And I
quality.
said, "You know what? I'm going to lose this job." And I was just second year law student, and it was paying a lot of money. But I said, "I'm going
Mhm.
to lose this job." I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, Mr. Silverstein, I don't know anything about the ghetto." Because he didn't know me. We
Mhm.
haven't spoken. I said, "I don't know anything about the ghetto," but I said, "Perhaps you do. And perhaps you should try to share it with everybody at the table." So when I said that, all the partners, everyone else just froze, their head dropped, and within 2 minutes, the luncheon was over. And we
Um,
got back to the office. By the time we got back to the office, the other partners who didn't go, they started to apologize because word got out what he said. He probably thought I was going to tell Georgetown, etc. But I said, "I'm not going to tell anybody." I said, "If you're going to fire me, just fire me. But I'm not going to let you say I know more about the ghetto. You don't know where I'm from."
mhm.
So they had to make a decision, like most firms, at the end of the summer, who they want to hire full time. And I said, "I know I'm better than all these people who are here because I had an accounting background. So I knew tax
Mhm.
really well." I said,
Right.
"None of them are better than me." I knew that for a fact. So I said, "If they hire anyone, they have to hire me." And so they did extend an offer to me. And my friend David Green said, "Bruce, you going to work?" I said, "Dave, there are people like this all over America." I said, "A tax attorney is very few of us. If I go to another firm, they probably have no other African American as well." I said, "I'll deal with the evil that I have." And I
Mhm.
did. So I took the offer and I worked for him. And during the 2 years, we were going back and forth until I got tired of him and he got tired of me. And I said, "Let's get out of here."
So he did after that occasion, and you said you were going back and forth.
Oh, he was
I'm
just
just
challenging me. Like, how do you know? How do you know to look into get tax histories? Just basic stuff.
right,
How do you know about going into legislative intent and get the history? I said,
right.
I learned that. I learned that in college. I said, "So do you want me to teach you?" So I would say, "Do you want me to teach you how to do it?"
Oh my
And so that's
goodness.
how the conversations were going with him. Because I was like, "Hey, you fire me, you fire me." I mean,
Yeah,
I started out with no money, so not having any money and having my pride is much more important to me.
for sure, for sure. And you had the obviously the gravitas to not only take that, I think, internal stand because you took a moment when you said you take a moment to pause and you
Right.
it could have gone one direction or another, and your direction was, I'm going to stay true to myself, look them in the eye and say what I have to say. You then spent 2 years with them, obviously sharpening your skills, learning your craft. That's what I
Yep.
always say to young lawyers early out. It's like you learned your craft as a tax lawyer, but then you took a big shift to the music industry. That was when you left and formed the other,
Absolutely. Yep.
so talk a little bit about why 2 years in, certainly fatigued from Mr. Silverstein and the likes, but why did you decide to make the shift to the industry that you did?
A few reasons. I guess myself and a few friends said, how do rich people get rich? We used to have those discussions. And we said, working for a firm is not going to do it. We have to create our own business. And we
Mm,
said, real estate or some business we have to create. And so we started a management company managing artists. And I think I always wanted to get back into entertainment because in the book I mentioned it, I want to be on Broadway. And
right. That was a
none of my friends
shocker.
ever knew that.
Yeah.
No one knew that until I wrote the book because you can't grow up in the projects and want to be on Broadway. We played basketball all the time, but I would sneak away and say I have to go visit my grandmother. And I used to take acting, singing, and dance lessons. And then singing, I couldn't sing. Dance, they wanted me to wear tights at 10, 12 years old. So I wasn't doing that. And singing, I mean, acting, I was good at. So I had to make a decision ultimately, college or acting. And I said, let me go with the safe bet. And it was college. But I think we want to form our own business. So we started managing artists. And eventually I said, I have a law degree. Why don't I start representing artists? And I did. And the first big artist I got was Pete Rock at that time,
Mm,
CL Smooth. Pete Rock was the one of the top producers in the world. It's Pete Rock or Dr. Dre. Those are the
right.
top two producers. And everyone wanted to represent Pete Rock. But when I went to see his family, they're Jamaican, they live in Mount Vernon, New York. They said, everyone wants to come here, Bruce, but we didn't raise our kid to 18 years old and pass him over to someone who don't look like us. And I give them a lot of credit. And I give Pete, he and I still got a good relationship and communicate and talk. I say, man, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be who I am. And because that's big for a family to say back then. You're talking about
Sure.
in the 90s, right? Like, hey, listen, we're not giving him to someone white. We're going to give him to someone who look like us. And are you ready, Bruce? I said, I'm ready. And through Pete, we're able to get Heavy, because Heavy was from Mount Vernon, LL, everyone, like MC Light,
Right.
everyone wanted to be affiliated with Pete. So Pete helped me build my practice.
Yeah. And those days, obviously, I'm a product of those days as well. So I remember when they were coming on the scene. It was a very exciting time. Obviously, had success there, but you also acknowledge in the book that um, you were able to, I guess, project into the future.
Right.
And as you said, that you were looking for a way to build stability, wealth. Tell me what it is that you saw in those you who were, I guess, in partnership with you that you said, I'm going to pivot and look at another opportunity.
I
Can you
try to
talk
tell
about
young
that?
people all the time, be strategic with your career. Just don't work. Look at where your job may be at the future. Look ahead and try to get there before others get there, right? Just don't work. And so when I saw the actual pivot take place with digital media, which is a different form, and Napster, a different form of distribution, as opposed to physical album, digital album, I said, I got to go with a
Right.
tech company. And that's how I decided to go with Microsoft. But I made one final call, and you all may have known Clarence Avon, who's the Godfather. He was one of my mentors.
Yes.
He passed
He
away,
just passed away.
has
Yep.
passed away. So I called Clarence. I said, Clarence, should I go with and Clarence cursed a lot. So I said, Clarence, should I go with Microsoft? He said, Bruce, take your beat there and get that stop. And he said, if you don't like it, you can come back, but go. And so I
Mm,
decided to go, right, to the Northwest. And I left my family, and we lived in Mount Vernon at the time, in Mount Vernon. And I went up there. I think from a career standpoint, it was the best decision I made because I did help create the Windows Media Player. I was on a team that created that. And it just took me on a different trajectory, right?
right.
However, from a personal standpoint, it was not probably, it was a poor decision because that was the demise of my marital relationship, right? I mean, you go 1 month, every month, and it's 2 months, then it's like, I'm tired. This is a long trip back and forth. And you find
Right.
yourself living two separate lives. So it was a
Yeah.
mistake in that vantage point. Do I regret it? I think, I think it was a reason for me. We have a great relationship now. We talk probably
Sure.
2, 3 times a week. Um,
Sure.
but I think it was supposed to be that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So major pivot, perhaps, yeah, everything's hindsight because it wasn't just a state away. It was cross country,
It
like
was
we're
cross
probably
country.
Seattle, right? I
Yep,
assume you were in
Seattle.
Seattle up in there. And I back then, like we hear nowadays about families just uprooting, moving and all of that, but it really wasn't, it would have been a new thing,
Yeah,
right? To
absolutely.
some extent. And particularly with your proximity to home and Brooklyn, and that culture, that home base for your family. It's interesting that you have that sort of observation now, and it's good to hear also and prove that the relationships are solid now. You've done the work,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. It's
So
great
to
now.
to get there. So I'm looking at the time. I want us to have at least 10 minutes for some
I'm fine
Q&A.
with time. Don't worry about me.
Okay, awesome, because some folks are populating. I'm acknowledging if I see your question that I will definitely pose it, and some other commentary, but I want to sort of wrap up the discussion portion of what I'm observing, and that you've shared is when you talk about all of the notables in the entertainment industry in particular, because it's really interesting to me that some of the notables that you have had a close working relationship with, and maybe personal relationship, they've made choices in their lives too,
Yeah, he did.
right? And so um, I'd love for you to share more about the inner voice that was speaking, has maybe it got louder as you got older. We all have wisdom. We all, wisdom comes with age, right? Um, when you found yourself working with some of the major, larger than life notables, some of which you recited, can you talk a little bit more about the wisdom that you had in some of those rooms? I know in the book you talk about, for the element of gang violence that may have been around certain artists, you had opportunities to carry a weapon. You never carried a weapon. I probably would have carried a weapon. People would be surprised to hear that.
I still don't have one in North
I know
Carolina.
Reverend Barnes would have her weapon. I mean, so coming out of Detroit. So why is it that you made that? I mean, that's kind of surprising to me, to be honest. I was like, man, I can't believe he would. I would have had something, a little 6 shooter, something, a
Right,
little.
right. Now, someone would, if you read the book, one of them clients put stuff on my table in my office. I said, I don't want to touch it. I don't want it. I don't even have
Yeah.
anything in North Carolina here, right? And people said,
Mhm.
Bruce, you should have something in your house. I said,
Yeah.
I don't want a weapon.
Yeah.
But no, I just stayed away from that type stuff, man, because I
Mm,
realized that, Bruce, you got to try to be as clean as possible.
mm.
You could quickly turn this thing around, your reputation. And when I
Right.
was in a room with them, like at the end of the day, when I'm in a room with them, they're just people. And if you
Right.
realize a lot of them, and you have more knowledge than they do in business, period, right? So they're just performing they act. But in
Right.
terms of like, come on, I always thought that I had the upper hand when I was as an attorney, period, because I had a tax background, I was an accounting major, and I'm an attorney. So I know how to negotiate with the best of them. And in terms of having a tax background, they don't have that. I
Right.
mean, they don't even have the accounting background. So I thought
Correct.
that I can
Yeah.
always offer more to clients, right? If I get in front of them. But when I'm in a room with them, I look at them as like if I'm in a room with some CEO executive, you're just an ordinary person, right?
Sure.
Come to me
Yeah.
for services. And I think
Yeah.
you have to, if you're African American, you have to feel that way about yourself. Like, hey, listen, you coming to me. You're not doing me
Yeah.
a favor. Pete Rock did me a favor to open up the door, and I'll give him
Sure.
credit. But the rest of them, you're coming to me to provide a service because you know you can get something from me because there's other attorneys trying to provide for your services. So I always
Right.
had an air of like confidence, right? When I'm in a room with
Right.
them. I look at them like they're just ordinary people, right? When I'm in a room with anyone. I mean, think about it. We
Right.
went to school with Justice Blackmun's grandson. Did you know that?
I didn't know. I was like, who's that? Because I didn't know that. Who's that?
He was in my year, but he had the opportunity of talking legal talk at the dinner table, at the lunch table,
Right. For sure.
but not really. He's just a regular person. You know what I
Sure.
mean? He probably
Yeah.
got in it because they made a call, right, to
Right.
Bellum because they said they have 10% of the seats set aside for special privileges. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I always look at people as, hey, listen, you got here because you're smart, but also somebody looked out for you. And as
Right.
entertainers, you have the talent, but you're here because I'm providing a service for you.
Correct. Yeah, that's just, I think it's, I personally think that's the special sauce of just human interaction, is to recognize that we really all are on an equal playing field as
Right.
human beings. But certain people have other talents and gifts, and others have
Right.
others, and it's just the lever. But society, we know, elevates
Hmm.
certain individuals just because of the company that they keep or what they think they know of them. At the end of the day, we are all just human beings on this journey, and
Yep.
no one with a higher calling than any other,
I would
but it's
agree.
a choice of how they choose to use their time, invest their time, and give their time. So we are a community of faith, Bruce, and we believe strongly in hearing and learning about the stories of our ancestors. It's one of the reasons why Keith wanted to have this series, is because of the richness of what we learned from our ancestors. Would you be willing to share with us how faith in whatever form has displayed itself in your life? I think I see it throughout. There's clearly a hand of protection over you in various instances. And maybe even as you said, you reflect on where I am in life now. Boy, I've been blessed. But can you offer some more sharing and reflection about how faith has contributed to your life, maybe in the past, but also maybe where you are today?
No, I think it's like I said, I have that discussion with people all the time because people are like, how did you do it? I'm like, listen, God's looking after me. And you're right, it's throughout. It's when I was in Brooklyn and I did some stuff and I just didn't do it long enough to get caught.
Mm,
When I went and did the paper, that's only one thing. I didn't get caught. When I went to department stores and did certain things, I didn't get caught.
mhm.
So it's a reason why, right? And I think
Right,
going to the NOAA program was a program I needed to go to because I would not have not gone there. I would not be here today.
right.
I truly believe that. So it's like, why am I there? Georgetown, how did I end up at Georgetown? I got an offer from a big four accounting firm. And an African American woman said, what do you really want to do? I said, I want to go to law school. She said, don't take this offer. Although to me, an offer from a big eight accounting firm at the time was like hitting a home run for my family.
Absolutely.
She said, don't. She said, okay, did you apply? I said, yes. She said, I know somebody at the university. Take a trip down there. That's how that happened. Right. So it's all like,
Yeah.
it's for a reason.
Yeah.
And White introduced me to Silverstein. And although we had a run in, that is one of the top tax firms in the city.
Right.
So it's to me all along, it's like, Bruce, how do you maneuver? How do you maneuver at Microsoft and get the co-chairman of the Fortune 1 company to be your sponsor?
Right.
They're like, how do you do that? I said, I just said, I'll help you. And when I want a job, I'll say, Brad. And why would he do that? I would go to him and say, Brad, I'm applying for this job. He said, I think you'll do good at it. And the next thing I hear is the president of that group said, hey, Brad just stopped by and said, he didn't say hi you, but he said, I think Bruce would be good at that job. But if you're smart, you know what he's trying to say, but not say it.
Right.
So why would
Right.
that happen, right? And I had him throughout my entire run. There was people there who didn't like me, but no one would touch me if I had, because they know they would have to answer to him.
Right.
So how does the African American get that close to someone who's a vice chairman of a company like that, right? And how do you get to a point today where you can really, really retire and set your kids up if you go today?
Right.
I'm not special. I told you I went through a special program. It was like the yellow bus at Hofstra. You know what I mean? So that's the bus I was on. So how do I get from that yellow Hofstra bus to today without being looked over, right?
Yeah.
So to me, this no other explanation because I know me. It's not someone else saying, Bruce, you were blessed. No, you don't got to tell me. I know
Yeah.
me and I know my struggles and my challenges. And there's no
Right.
other explanation. Yeah, I worked hard. Where'd I get that from? Staying up all night, working hard? Come on. I know where it comes from. And
Yeah.
it's not to say I go to church every Sunday. I don't. But I know where the blessings come from, and I certainly pray and say thanks every morning I get up, right? But
Mm,
not just for me, for other folks, right?
Right.
So I know. So it's totally, unequivocally, Bruce been looked out after, but for a reason, like I said.
Right.
I think I can only assume it's like Bruce. And some of the things I got and people don't understand, they like, Bruce, why'd you give that away? I said, listen, some of this, I got so much stuff that I'm supposed to know that God didn't give it all to give to me. So some things is for me to give to somebody else because it's not going to
Right.
hurt me. And I'm not going to stop doing it because I don't want my blessings to stop. You know what I mean?
Stop. Amen. That's
I said,
awesome.
no, so I'm going to keep doing it. It may seem foolish. Somebody did something wrong for me and I'm helping them to get a job. Why are you helping that person get a job? And he did that for you. God put me in the position to know the person that can help him get a job.
Yeah.
So he and I don't
Yeah.
get along, but I'm gonna recommend him so he can get the job. And
Yeah.
I'm fine with that because it doesn't hurt me to
Yeah.
do things like that.
That
That's
Because
that
awesome.
I'm coming from a point of just being blessed. So I'm like, nobody's going to interfere with my blessings. If you don't like
Awesome.
me and I don't talk to you, I'm still going to help you out because I may be tested.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. Well,
Now, then,
Jackie, I want you to give some time to those who have questions
yes.
in the chat. But I also, Bruce, I have two. One is I was struck by early on of you telling the story of being arrested at 48. You had accomplished all of these things,
Mhm.
and basically they lock you up for a parking ticket of your brother.
Yep.
Uh, can you talk about how you dealt with how you got over your anger with respect to that? Because I'm sitting here reading it mad for you, man. I'm just like, so talk about that, having accomplished so much. You can give everybody an idea of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think what it was it was in Brooklyn. So I got arrested twice as a Microsoft attorney. I'm not sure if you're talking about when I was riding with a friend to celebrate a big deal that we closed, and we bought some crabs and beer, and they arrested me, or when I was in Brooklyn and I got arrested. Well, you told me the parking ticket was we closed at that point $100 million deal. We celebrated in the office, and then I said I'm going to celebrate with my friends. So I was living in the projects again with my mother because that's when I was in the process of getting divorced. So where do you go? You go home.
Yep.
So I was home with my mother. So I said, I'm gonna go with my friends and we're gonna get some crabs and beer and celebrate. And so the cops basically followed me to the project. So I had a nice car at that point. And they said, we're running a ticket. There's something wrong with your license. And ultimately, it was my brother got a ticket, parking ticket, didn't tell me about it. So they took me to the precinct, ran me through all of that, and then spend the night in jail. Some of my friends tried to get me out early, but I had to spend the night, take pictures. I was booked essentially. And the next morning I got out and I went back to my mother's house, took a shower, and then got to Microsoft at about, instead of 9, 11 o'clock. And I just started working. My philosophy on that is that happens to brothers all the time. And I don't think because of my background, financial position, that would not stop. Because no one's going to ask you, where did you go to school? If you're black, what's your background, right? Because if you see me on a regular day, I'm at jeans, I'll fit in the dress code of someone living in the inner city, right? I'm not wearing
Yeah.
a suit. So yeah, they'll stop me. And they stopped me again in Brooklyn after that and arrest me. I spent a day in jail. So to me, that can happen. I just accept the fact that can happen all the time as a black man because we live in a racist society, right? But people have stereotypes, and they would not, for one instance, think that I'm working for Microsoft as an attorney.
Right.
But Keith, that's just my philosophy. It's
Yeah, it's still hard not to get angry because of it. It may be a fact of life, but when it actually happens and it's
yeah.
not a theory that it could happen, I applaud you
When
for.
I'm in jail, I'm angry. I'm like, I don't want to
Well,
be here. Mommy, get me out of here. I'm like, Mommy, help.
well, that's what I was going to say. I think in the text you do describe how you had to, because you had your sensibilities to know you needed to be in a cell where there was a phone access to you because they take everything from
Right,
you.
you need a
And
phone. You need a phone
yeah, but
for help.
you're amongst the masses, and I sense the anger, but it was sort of, I don't want to say it was controlled, but you displayed some of the emotion that you had to display and that you were legitimately feeling. But one night, I think the second time was it 2 nights? I felt like one of the instances
No,
it
it was
seemed like
late. It was late one night. It was early in the day they stopped me. So real
yeah,
early.
Yeah.
So I had to spend that entire day and then the next day. So it was going on 2 nights. But after one night, the second day is a little easier.
Yeah. But it's still, you just rack your
It's
mind. You
still
literally
jail,
are
and you got to put
leaving
on
a
you got to
deal.
play a certain role when you're locked up.
Exactly. Yeah. That's just, well, Um, so some of the questions, can you comment a little bit about what happened with your cousins and you? Because some of them took other paths and just have different, but you were raised amongst cousins, I think friends that were like cousins, play cousins, that's our culture. But can you talk a little bit more so I think about
Unfortunately, no one went to
specifically,
college.
you're
No one
still
went to
the only
college.
one. Okay.
My main cousin, what is he doing now? He's collecting disability, right?
Mm.
My other cousin is doing real estate, right? And friends doing a variety of things. Some working in a law firm, but in the mail room, things like that. No one went to college, so they don't have professional jobs. So they just make it,
With
to be quite
Yeah,
honest,
within your generation, but the
within my
generation
generation.
behind you, you have
The
children.
generation behind me are my kids. So with my
Hmm.
kids, all three went to, it wasn't a discussion. We didn't even talk about it. They just
Yeah.
said, I'm going to this school.
Hmm.
Then if I look at beyond my kids, none of my brother, one of my sister's kids went to college, right? So it's still, the numbers are down, right?
Right.
My immediate family is down. There's only
Yeah.
probably not many of outside of my kids.
Yeah. Well, I guess I want to comment too that although college has been like you have to go to college somehow, so it's for the Black community, you have to go to college. I think that there is something, not college is not for everyone,
No,
right?
I would agree
But
with that.
so I think as we
But I would
evolve as a,
say,
go
so I
ahead.
probably shouldn't say they didn't go to college. Many of them have jobs that they're just surviving week to week.
Mm, okay. Okay. Was there any motivation from your teachers for you to attend college? This is one of our questions in the chat. And who was your model? Because I do think the summer experience, the NOAA experience definitely was a trajectory. But before you went to the NOAA program, I don't know that you really, from the text, that you were saying adamantly in high school, I'm going to college.
No, I think no one, if you go through the book, I mentioned one professor, English professor, kind of laughed at the thought of me going to
To
college.
college. Hmm.
So no, I had people saying I shouldn't go to college in high school. I
Right.
should look at a trade school. So I just thought in my own head,
Yeah.
I'm going to college, right? And I was
Right.
wrong, which is why I wanted to quit, right?
Right.
They were right. I wasn't ready. And I was going to quit. So if it had not been for the NOAA program, if I went to some other school without that support system there, I would have flunked out or left.
Right. Right. As we wrap up, last chance for anyone to put something in the chat. I wanted to ask you again the title of the book, Never Far From Home. What does that look like for you today? What is home? What is home for you in the title? How is it resonating in your life today, if at all? Maybe it's not.
It
Maybe
does
like,
still connected to friends I grew up with in the projects, family, still connected. Although I'm in New York or North Carolina or Puerto Rico, they'll come here. They'll come to North Carolina quicker than they'll come to Puerto Rico, but friends still connected, whether it's phone or visiting them, like I said, in the projects, or visiting them where they are. I mean,
and then
that's their friends, right?
right.
Like I said, I shouldn't. A lot of them are smarter than me. It's
Mm,
about opportunity, right? So I don't look at me as being special in any way. I just look at me as being blessed and fortunate to have the opportunity. But with that, I said, comes a lot of obligation and responsibility with that.
right. Maybe the next book on generational wealth or how to pass that on, that your daughter has planted the seed.
Yeah, she
Um,
did.
Good. These are the final five quick questions. Knicks or Nets?
Both. I grew up a Knicks fan, but I'm going
Okay.
for both New York teams.
Okay. Beach and a book or a pool and music?
It has to be the pool, Puerto Rico pool and the music.
Okay. Favorite meal?
It used to be my grandmother's red rice and barbecue
Okay.
chicken, but now I don't eat meat. I eat seafood. Salmon is what I eat.
Okay. Um, finish these two sentences. I am Bruce Jackson, and I am.
And I am a vehicle that others can use to be successful.
Okay. And if I had a chance to have dinner with anyone, living or deceased, it would be.
I would say, I mean, I think the natural reaction probably would be someone is African American historian, but I think we know a lot about history. And a lot of information's out there. I would say I would probably again because I'm at the next phase, we got to inspire people to be the best they can be. But the next thing I think that's important, people have to gain power. And how do you gain power? Financially. If kids have an idea, Bill Gates was able to do what he did because his family supported him financially, right? And even
Right.
today, venture capitalists are not really giving money to women or African Americans at the same rate they're giving it to Caucasian. So I would
Okay.
say Warren Buffett would be someone I would sit down with so I can learn more about creating his wealth,
Okay.
certainly generation wealth. And the person I would have accompany me there is the daughter that I'm talking about because she
All
would
right.
spread the word and when I'm gone, continue to do so.
That's wisdom. That's wisdom. Bruce, thank you so much for
Jackie,
your
can I
time.
just
Sure.
there are two other comments, one from our treasurer, Bruce, talking about you brought back memories of her growing up in Brooklyn. So I just want to acknowledge that. And then Jackie, who is a trustee, worked for a pharmaceutical company and says she relates to being the only African American person. So go ahead. So thank you so much. I'll let Jackie close out, but it's been really rich. Deacon Melba, did you have a question? I saw your hand go up and then it disappeared. So I don't know if that was a mistake or not.
Yeah, that was a mistake.
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
good.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you again, Bruce. We really appreciate your sacrifice of time. This was rich. It obviously punctuates some of the themes that we've been talking about in our author series. You have accomplished the inspiration and the encouragement through your memoir. I really ask those who joined us to finish it if you haven't started it or share it with others, because I do think there's just so much in Bruce's journey that, yes, we may have some commonalities with, but he took the extra time to memorialize it in this fabulous memoir. So we thank you, wish you continued success with getting this message out in the story. And of course, all many blessings to you, Bruce, because you clearly are a very good steward of God's blessings to others. So thanks so much for sharing that with us
And
today.
thank
Yeah.
you. If anyone has any questions, all you got to do is the easiest way to reach me is LinkedIn.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well,
Thank
thanks so
you.
much, Bruce. Have